Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the hidden shared burden of chronic pain. It's a struggle that takes a huge toll, not just on the person who feels it, but also on the one who stands right by their side, watching and, well, weeding. So let's start with a really tough question, one that gets right to the heart of this whole thing. How do you actually explain a pain that just never, ever ends? I mean, making an invisible, internal, and completely relentless experience understandable to someone on the outside, that's one of the biggest challenges there is. To make this invisible struggle tangible, we're going to turn to a really powerful metaphor, hang gliding. But look, this isn't about the thrill of a quick flight. No, this is about what happens when that flight never, ever ends. We're going to talk about the infinite flight. Okay, so imagine a perfect day for soaring. A normal flight, it's got a clear beginning, middle, and end, right? A launch, a thrill, and then a landing. But for someone with chronic pain, it's like getting caught in a violent, permanent thermal. There is no landing in sight. They are just stuck up there, in the air, indefinitely. First, let's try to understand this infinite flight from the perspective of the pilot. That's the person who is actually in the harness, living with this pain every single moment of every single day. So the problem starts with the pilot's gear. Their variometer, the instrument that tells them if they're rising or sinking, it's busted. It's just screaming, stall, stall, even when the air is perfectly calm. And this is such a perfect analogy for what's called central sensitization. The nervous system is just firing off emergency alerts for no good reason, making every tiny little sensation feel like an absolute catastrophe. This metaphor also helps explain behavior that can seem really contradictory from the outside. One moment, they might need loud music. The next, total silence. And it's not because they're trying to be difficult. They're like a pilot caught in an erratic crosswind, frantically trying anything. Turn left, turn right, speed up, slow down, just desperately searching for a pocket of stable air that just isn't there. This state is often called a cloud suck. The pilot is in a total whiteout. They can't see the horizon. They can't even see their instruments. All of their mental and physical energy is completely consumed by one single task, just trying to stay upright. There's no bandwidth left for a conversation, for planning, for anything else at all. Now imagine, after being battered by that turbulence for so long, the pilot is absolutely terrified and exhausted. As they approach what looks like a safe landing, they might kick and scream at the very person who's running to help them. And it's not malice, it's the sheer panic of a crash landing. That person is the only solid thing to grab onto in a moment of pure terror. And finally, this whole experience is just profoundly lonely. The pilot is stuck up there fighting the elements, while down below, they can see everyone else who had a normal 20-minute flight. They're all back on the ground, drinking beers, celebrating, while the pilot is still trapped in the sky, totally and completely alone. But here's the thing. The pilot isn't the only one involved in this flight. Not by a long shot. So now, let's shift our perspective down to the ground, to the experience of the ground crew. The caregiver who's on the radio, watching this whole thing from below. So while the pilot is experiencing those false alarms firsthand, the caregiver is on the radio, hearing that shrill alarm just blaring constantly in their ear. They have to keep a calm voice and say, "It's okay, the wing is fine," all while their own mind is just drained by the endless noise. This is something called acoustic fatigue. And as the pilot is thrashing around up there looking for stable air, the ground crew is the one sprinting across the landing zone. They're trying to meet these constantly changing demands, moving the target every 5 seconds. And the result? Total physical burnout from chasing a goal that moves faster than they can possibly run. And when the pilot is blinded by that whiteout of pain, the caregiver becomes the sole navigator. They're trying to give directions to someone who can barely even hear them, carrying the entire mental map for 2 people. This leads to this crippling decision overload. And during that panicked landing, well, the caregiver is the person running upwind to catch the glider. They are the one who gets kicked, who gets hit by the frame. Their job is to absorb that impact, shake it off, and just hold on tight to make sure the pilot doesn't crash. The pilot may be alone in the sky, but the caregiver is just as alone on the ground. They're sitting in the chase truck, eyes totally fixed on the sky. They can't go to the party either. They have to stay on duty, sharing that profound isolation, while the rest of the world just moves on without them. Okay, so this has been an incredibly vivid analogy, right? Now, let's bring it all back to earth and connect this to the clinical reality of what it means to care for someone with chronic pain. There's actually a clinical term for this. It's called secondary victimization, and it's the process where the chaos that's happening inside the patient's nervous system gets externalized, and the caregiver's daily life starts to become a mirror image of that internal turmoil. So this isn't just empathy, it's a direct transfer of the burden itself. And this chart, it illustrates that direct translation of the burden perfectly. For every single symptom the patient experiences, there's a parallel form of endurance for the caregiver. The patient's sleeplessness and pain, that leads to the caregiver's constant hypervigilance, what's called mirror fatigue. The patient's emotional ability turns the caregiver into a lightning rod, forced to just absorb all the outbursts. It's a direct one-to-one transfer of complete and utter exhaustion. And this brings us to the most important takeaway from this entire infinite flight analogy. Because this isn't just a story about one person's pain and another person's help. It's about a deeply, deeply shared experience. The person on the ground, the one running, planning, absorbing, and waiting, is just as exhausted from the flight as the person who's actually in the air. The burden isn't separate. It is a shared state of relentless exhaustion. And all of this leaves us with a final and maybe the most important question. Once we truly see that the ground crew is enduring their very own version of this infinite flight, well, we have to ask, who is looking out for them? Who is taking care of the caregiver?